Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I hope you're all enjoying Municon 2021. My name is Karen Ginicola, and I am a hydrologist in Ecology's Water Quality Program headquarters, and I am the moderator for this talk, Integrating Salmon-Safe and the NPDES Permit. The talk will be given by Autumn Salamack, the Environmental Services Coordinator for the City of Shoreline, and John Featherstone, Shoreline's Surface Water Utility Manager, and Bryan Berkompas, a hydrologist at Aspect Consulting. During their presentation, please type your questions in the chat, and your questions will be answered live following the presentation. Thank you, Autumn and John and Bryan. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to kick things off this morning. So as Karen mentioned, I'm Autumn Salamack, Environmental Services Coordinator with the City of Shoreline. I manage our environmental sustainability and climate change programs, and I also coordinate implementation of our Salmon Safe certification. So I'll be joined by John and Bryan today, and we're very happy that you chose to join us. So in April 2019, Shoreline was recognized as the first Salmon Safe certified city in the state of Washington, and only the second certified city in the nation after Portland, Oregon. Salmon Safe certification recognizes Shoreline's regional leadership in preventing water pollution and improving the health of Puget Sound. Our City Council is very supportive of efforts to protect our environment and decided to make certification a priority back in 2017 to help advance sustainability and climate goals. The assessment process for Salmon Safe certification consisted of a gap analysis and field reviews with an interdisciplinary team of scientists and city staff. The gap analysis identified many areas of consistency with Salmon Safe standards, along with some concerns and opportunities to improve environmental performance across city operations. The entire process took about a year and resulted in a final certification report that outlines 12 conditions for the city to meet over a 5-year period to further reduce pollutants and pesticide use, improve erosion control, conserve water, and install green infrastructure to keep stormwater runoff clean. These conditions are customized for our city, and the specific language and requirements for each condition were negotiated between Salmon Safe and city staff over several months. It's great to have that level of customization, but it means that you can't simply check with another city or property that's been certified to see how they met the requirements, because there are nuances specific to each certification process. While all of our Salmon Safe conditions align with our stormwater pollution prevention goals, 8 of them specified future actions that explicitly impact our surface water utility, as noted in gray on the slide. John and Bryan will talk in detail about conditions 1, 6, and 7, which have the strongest alignment with the NPDES permit. The other 5 stormwater-related conditions are Condition 2, which requires us to incorporate green stormwater infrastructure into the standard roadway cross-section to identify preferred low-impact development techniques for right-of-ways. Condition 3, which is very specific to our North Maintenance Facility and says we need to improve material storage and handling practices and meet the Salmon Safe guidelines for future design and construction projects at the site. Condition 4, which requires us to incorporate a drainage area assessment into the existing GIS layer of stormwater infrastructure to enable calculations of the drainage areas being managed by various stormwater management techniques. Condition 11, which has a requirement to complete substantial design for 3 projects with habitat restoration and stormwater management elements within 5 years. And finally, Condition 12, which says we need to include a prioritized list of potential in-stream, riparian, and upland water management plus monitoring projects that benefit salmon in the next update of the Surface Water Master Plan. And with that, I will hand it over to John.
All right, thank you, Autumn. I'm John Featherstone, the Surface Water Utility Manager, and I'll walk through Salmon Safe Conditions 1 and 6 for the City of Shoreline. So for Salmon Safe Condition 1, it requires the City of Shoreline to apply Salmon Safe Model Stormwater Guidelines, which are basically design standards, as a checklist, which is supplemental to our existing requirements and standards. And this is applied only to new and redeveloped city facility projects. Our draft checklist is due next year to Salmon-Safe for their review, and implementation is due in 2024. Next slide, please. So at the time of certification, one of our biggest questions was how would these Salmon-Safe requirements apply and relate to our existing requirements under the city's Western Washington Phase II Municipal Stormwater Permit, which I'll refer to in shorthand as the Phase II permit, or sometimes as NPDES. And Salmon-Safe could not provide this information to us at the time of certification, largely because their standards are written sort of, they're based in Oregon, and their standards are potentially could be applied broadly to any number of public or private projects in any number of states or jurisdictions. So they really couldn't provide this comparison for us. And that's one of the reasons why implementation for this condition is fairly bite-sized. That's why it's only applied to city facility projects, really, which is a smaller subset of all the work that the city is doing and that is being done in the city. As far as doing that comparison, Salmon-Safe Condition 1 most closely overlaps with Phase II permit requirements under Section S5 C6, controlling runoff from new development, redevelopment, and construction sites, Part B, which many Phase II jurisdictions like the City of Shoreline comply with by adopting Ecology Stormwater Management Manual for Western Washington, which I'll refer to in shorthand as the Ecology Manual. So that's the main document that we needed to compare our standards to, where was the Ecology Manual as our existing requirements. On the Salmon-Safe side of things, there were two key documents that we needed to look at. The first and the main one is Salmon-Safe Urban Standards, which is a fairly hefty 73-page document of detailed standards, which includes core urban certification standards section U1 for stormwater management, which has roughly 36 specific requirements. A second document that we looked at was Model Stormwater Management Guidelines for Ultra-Urban Redevelopment, which is basically about maximizing LID usage and flow control at sites to restore pre-development hydrology. So it's that pre-development forested condition for so many of us in Western Washington. Next slide, please, Autumn. So if that sounds familiar, just sort of what I described a little bit about what Salmon-Safe is looking for, it's because there is a lot of similarity between what the Ecology Manual is looking for and what Salmon-Safe is looking for. And at a glance, they contain a lot of similar language and objectives. However, they're organized differently as standards and they use different phrasing. So it's really hard to tell sort of at a glance what Salmon-Safe might require above and beyond ecology requirements. So we have to do some in-depth analysis and really walk through all these requirements and compare them. So at the city, this first step was done for Condition 1 last year by Pertit in a tech memo that they developed while doing the design of a new city maintenance facility on Ballinger Way in the northeast part of Shoreline. So thanks to Pertit for taking this big first step and laying out the requirements and walking through them within the context of this project. And more recently, city staff reviewed the Pertit memo and created a matrix to generalize and analyze the results of what Pertit did as sort of to take a next step towards that checklist. And you can see it in the slide, there's a screenshot from this matrix. I won't have time to walk through all of these 36 requirements and compare them all in detail. So we're gonna have to keep things really high level, but you can see the color coding used in the matrix here is red for where Salmon-Safe goes above and beyond our current requirements, yellow where we need to figure stuff out more, and then green is where we're already in compliance with Salmon-Safe thanks to Phase II. Next slide, please, Autumn. So that, again, in summary, so I won't be able to talk too much about details, but there are 10 of the 36 Salmon-Safe requirements we are already in compliance with. There are 6, which, as I mentioned before, the Salmon-Safe requirements are pretty broad, so they just won't apply to the types of city facility projects that we're doing in the near future. So there's 6 we don't really need to be concerned with. And this is where things get interesting. There are 11 Salmon-Safe requirements that we need to do more research and circle back with Salmon-Safe on. And several of these are related to this language that Salmon-Safe uses regarding using GSI, green stormwater infrastructure, and other types of treatments like that to the, quote, greatest extent operationally or technically feasible, unquote. And so the interpretation on if we're already okay with this per ecology requirements versus what Salmon-Safe looks for will be based on infeasibility criteria and whether or not Salmon Safe will accept ecology and feasibility criteria or if they have their own. So we need to circle back with them on that one. And then finally, there are 9 Salmon Safe requirements that are clearly above and beyond what we're currently doing for phase 2. And those are generally related to Salmon Safe having some lower minimum thresholds for LID, site BMPs, on-site BMPs, water quality treatment, and flow control. And those are roughly aligned with ecology minimum requirements 5, 6, and 7, for those of you familiar with that stuff. There's also some specific BMP requirements that Salmon Safe wants us to do. So specifically LID site design, which is about minimizing hard surfaces, using permeable pavements to the maximum extent feasible, and also prohibiting materials that can leach metals like copper and zinc, which we know are harmful to salmon. So those places are more specific and perhaps above and beyond what ecology requirements have. So again, this is a work in progress. We still have a year to get our checklist of Salmon Safe and work on this with them. Next slide, please, Autumn. I'll only talk really briefly about condition 6 because we really haven't started our analysis of this yet, but this is the Salmon Safe construction stormwater management guidelines, and our requirement, what our condition 6 requirement has us doing is developing a companion checklist for a stormwater pollution prevention plan, or SWIP, again, which is a standard requirement of the ecology manual, and that will apply only to projects on city property. So again, a smaller subset of city projects, and this really echoes condition 1 in sort of what it's looking for and what it is applying to. So we will again need to do a detailed comparison of the ecology manual and NPDES requirements alongside what Salmon Safe is looking for. And it seems like the main differences, at least from an initial look, will be regarding what Salmon Safe considers an acceptable level of effort as far as construction stormwater BMPs to manage, mostly turbid runoff, as far as what ecology's acceptable level of effort looks like. And with that, that's about all the time I have, and I'm going to hand you off to Bryan to walk through condition 7.
Thanks, John. Again, my name is Bryan Berkompas. I work with Aspect Consulting, and we are assisting the city of Shoreline in various aspects of their permit, and one of those is on the water quality side. And looking at Salmon Safe Condition 7, it's asking the city to improve their water quality monitoring program. The city's had an ambient water quality program, and I think at times partnered with King County for many years, but Salmon Safe is asked that they increase several areas. And one of those is that they would add metal sampling to their existing program. And also that they would restart a benthic invertebrate monitoring program. So the city has done a few rounds of benthic invertebrate monitoring, but Salmon Safe has asked that they restart that and do it more regularly. Salmon Safe has also asked that the city add sampling locations in receiving waters that receive significant stormwater. And also that the current program is scheduled kind of monthly sampling program. And Salmon Safe's asked that they would add in a targeted sample event looking at storms and then non-storm events. And also that in addition to grabs, that the city would add automated sampling where it is feasible. And then finally, Salmon Safe's asked the city to develop a sampling and analysis plan that would lay out all these steps and incorporate it into their swamp. Next slide, please, Autumn. And so some of that aligns pretty well with the section S8 of the NPDES Phase II permit. So as most of you know, the permit has a few options for permittees, and they can either opt into paying for a regional fund under S8A for regional status and trends monitoring, and also under S8B for effectiveness and source identification studies. And these funds go into the Stormwater Action Monitoring Program, which has funded many of the studies that we've seen during this conference here. And but as an alternative, if a city or jurisdiction wanted to do local monitoring, maybe for internal knowledge or just a site-specific thing, or in this case, maybe to help satisfy Salmon Safe, but also meet their permit requirements, they could opt out of either S8A or S8B, in which case they would be required to monitor 3 sites within the city. Or if they opted out of both, they would be required by the permit to monitor 6 sites. Next slide, please. And so looking at these 2 monitoring programs side by side in the requirements, there is quite a bit of overlap, but also some key differences. And in this case, if the column has an orange box, that means that that particular program is more stringent, but also then that it would satisfy the less stringent requirements of the other program. So just looking at parameters, as I mentioned, Salmon Safe has asked the city to add metals to their analysis. If the city were to pursue stormwater discharge monitoring under the permit, they'd also have to add metals, but then in addition, pesticides, nutrients, and hydrocarbons to their monitoring program. Salmon Safe is asking for benthic invertebrate monitoring. The permit does not require that monitoring. Both programs would require storm and base flow sampling in a targeted manner. And then as far as sampling locations, like John's matrix earlier, yellow here indicates that there's still some work to do to figure this out. Salmon Safe is focused on in-stream locations or in the receiving water, whereas the permit is focused on outfalls based on land use. For example, commercial land use or high density residential. For a county, maybe it would include agriculture. And so while certainly the outfalls would contribute this significant stormwater that Salmon Safe is looking for their in-stream station, they obviously influence each other, they are not the same. And so some figuring out would still need to go there, whether there could be more compatibility. As far as frequency, the permit asks for 11 storms per year. Salmon Safe just says more frequent, but I believe adding 11 a year would meet that requirement. Sample types both need automated composites and grabs, and that's based kind of on the parameter being collected. The permit does require continuous flow monitoring at all sites. Salmon Safe does not have that requirement, although it certainly would benefit when trying to sample composite samples to have flow. And the permit requires stormwater solids twice a year at each site using sediment traps. Salmon Safe has no requirement for that. Both programs would require a QAPP or a sampling and analysis plan. As far as reporting, the permit has a requirement for annual reporting, but Salmon Safe, although not specified, has multiple, reporting requirements, and it would likely be about the same effort, even if it's not as well defined at this point. Neither program really has an end date. So as far as duration, sampling under the permit has so far run on about a 5-year cycle, and I anticipate that that would continue. And with Salmon Safe, the idea of the monitoring is that it would be to document improvement over time. And so again, no real end date there, just trying to keep track of trends and how things are going. And then finally in cost, I guess the closer that they can align, obviously, the closer the costs would be. It's still to be determined in many ways because the city is currently had opted in under this current permit for S8A and S8B. But if in the next permit cycle decided to opt out, it would depend on, one, what the permit looks like, but also whether they would opt out of either A or B or both and the effects on the cost there. And a lot of that may come into how Salmon Safe sampling locations and permit locations could be aligned and whether the city could do both concurrently. So with that, I will turn it back over to Autumn.
So we are 2 years in now and making steady progress on fulfilling our conditions of certification. While our Public Works Department is responsible for a lot of the work in our Salmon Safe program, that work is spread across multiple divisions and also has requirements for our Parks and Administrative Services Department. Thus, it's been critical to have someone in a coordinating role to keep tabs on what is required when, to serve as a conduit for reviewing materials with and getting feedback from Salmon Safe staff, and to look for those opportunities to leverage resources and messaging. You really do need someone to champion this program to help make it successful. You also need commitment from your leadership and an understanding that both staff and financial resources will be required to both obtain and implement your certification requirements. Our certification provides 5 years of technical assistance from Salmon-Safe staff, who've been really great to work with and very responsive in reviewing and commenting on draft documents and questions that we've sent them thus far. You can read our certification report and get status updates and learn more about Salmon-Safe on our website at shorelinewa.gov/salmon-safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Autumn and John and Brian, for that presentation. We do have time for a few questions, and there are a lot. We probably can't address all of them, but we'll do as many as we can. So the first is, that is a great matrix tool that the city developed. Is it available to other jurisdictions considering Salmon-Safe certification?
Yeah, I would say it's available. There's the caveats that, you know, every Salmon-Safe certification process is going to be different, but we're happy to share what we've figured out. And of course, some of the comparisons are kind of half-baked at this point that we need to circle back to Salmon-Safe on, but I'm more than happy to share, and especially jurisdictions considering Salmon-Safe are curious about it. I just put my email in the chat. So feel free to email me if you have a request or a question, and I'll do my best to not let it get buried in my inbox and get back to you in a timely manner.
Terrific. Next question is, how or did the Salmon-Safe organization help you to figure these things out? It seems like you did a lot of work, which is great and will help us all to develop better regulations.
Yeah, so in general, whenever we have a draft document or a question about a specific element of one of the condition requirements or our interpretation of how we're meeting it, it's just been a quick, email or conversation with Salmon-Safe. They have a technical team on call who can speak specifically to different areas of expertise. So it's just an ongoing conversation and a lot of back and forth.
And to add on to that, it's really been a collaborative effort the whole time. Like the initial conditions, the draft conditions they sent us, we reviewed and did a lot of sort of vetting and went back and forth, iterated a lot. So it was something that the city could manage, and it was more clarity on what was expected of us. And they've continued after certification. Like we recently had to clarify with them, well, how do you define a city facility? What exactly is a facility? And we proposed a definition of that so we could understand and make sure that we're doing what they are expecting of us. So yeah, they've been great in supporting that, and we'll continue, as we mentioned, to work with them on clarifying and confirming our understanding of the requirements.
Okay. Does having Salmon-Safe raise the bar in helping does having Salmon-Safe raise the bar? Does it help in discussion with your city council, especially when and if you're seeking funding?
I'll take this one, I guess. I would say, yeah, I mean, like what Brian was talking about for the Condition 7 analysis. And again, this is a sort of long-term effort in the sense of comparing what Salmon-Safe is asking our water quality monitoring program to do. Those changes, that will require more funding, and that will require us to, we'll have to raise rates or find that money from somewhere. So when we do, the process at Shoreline is surface water fees are, or I should say swim fees, surface water management fees are, they come out of our master planning, which we have a master plan that's starting within about a year. And so for those program recommendations that Brian is working on, we'll figure out what the cost impacts will be, and that will be built into our rate structure. And we'll come back to council at some point and say, will you approve this rate fee structure for the next several years? Because, this is at least this amount is needed to be compliant with Salmon-Safe. And we're doing similar things with our snow and ice control. That was something we didn't really get to cover in this topic, but there's all sorts of things done by other groups at the city too that will have Salmon-Safe impacts. And so part of being salmon safe compliant is coming back to council, which originally authorized us doing this and asking for more funding so we can be in compliance with the conditions.
Did you propose salmon safe to your council, or did your council propose salmon safe to you?
That Autumn, I think the history, I guess, predates Autumn, but it came from a staff recommendation, I believe, but there was a lot of support from council. So yeah, council really heavily supports salmon safe as well as the citizens.
What words of wisdom or cautionary words do you have for other cities that might be looking to become salmon safe certified?
Autumn, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I mean, one thing I'll say is you can approach it like we did, as your entire city in one certification, or you can approach it like Portland did. And they started with like individual departments. So you could start with just your parks department or just your public works department to really make it a little bit more, it's more piecemeal, but it might be more feasible financially and also just sort of culturally to build that. That said, it's been great for us to have it really encompass everything because it allows us to talk about it from a holistic perspective and to make sure that we're not just saying it's only, you know, our surface water utilities responsibility to protect water. It's like, no, it's really part of everybody's responsibility. And I think just thinking about the long-term resource needs associated with both managing the program and funding those ongoing improvements that you'll need to make, just really being, you know, realistic about what that's going to take in terms of staff time and financial resources.
I would add, from a surface water management perspective, it's been great in that we have this extra leverage to try to go above and beyond minimums. And this is something that for both climate change, which is a whole other thing, and salmon safe, the idea is we want to do GSI and, you know, manage as much stormwater above and beyond what the manual, ecology manual would have us do. So this gives us the ability to work with, you know, internally at the city and say, you know, we're not just asking for extra GSI on this project above and beyond the minimum is just for the heck of it. We actually need to do this because of salmon safe and because of climate and things like that. So it's been, I think, a good leverage tool for stormwater management to see if we can do more than just the minimum.
So a monitoring related question. Doesn't the permit only apply to water within the MS4 so that in-stream monitoring could pick up pollutants from outside the MS4 area or even outside of the jurisdiction? How does salmon safe address runoff or contributions from outside shoreline?
I can do my best on that. So there's yes, the permit is focused strictly on the MS4. And then as I had mentioned in my talk, that salmon safe is focused on the in-stream or the receiving water. And so there definitely is, that's maybe a fine line, but not, it's a distinct line. And so maybe in some ways, if to be truly compatible, salmon safe may have to move a little bit to the outfall closer there because there is that other, all kinds of other stuff going on in the receiving water in addition to the stormwater. And so that is something that needs to be, I guess, figured out yet a little bit as far as compatibility. And then on the whether water comes in or out, you know, that maybe is out of Shoreline's control for the most part. And John, maybe you can correct me here. For the most part, the streams that Shoreline's working in originate within Shoreline. Some of them maybe leave Shoreline, but I think outside of Ballinger,
right,
which leaves and then comes back in some ways, most of them, the city kind of has basically the headwaters and then either the entire length or not. So they don't have a lot of inputs coming in from other jurisdictions that's out of their control.
Yeah, that's correct.
Thanks, Bryan.
We're headwater area.
I want to thank all three of you for that fantastic presentation. We are at time. So for folks in the audience, if there are questions that you didn't get answered, please contact the presenters. Their information is in the program. And I just want to thank everybody for for participating in this conversation, particularly after our keynote this morning. Great good combination of topics. Everybody have a wonderful day at the rest of the conference, and we'll see you later.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.